Okay. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of you here. Pretty happy. Like, I know almost everybody, every one of you, either from the last seminar or from even way before. So it's a good group. What I want to focus on today is basically 4 years ago or 5 years ago, when I really started intensely working with Omegawave, I had tons of questions. And what I want to focus on is addressing this thing to my past self 4 or 5 years ago. Because when there's German coaches who want to use Omegawave, usually Michael refers them to me and, hey, just call Gerrit. And basically, all those questions that come, I try to really get my practical implications. Just an inside look how I approach things. Let me give you a little short introduction about me. Right now I work in ice hockey, or we work in ice hockey, but I can't play ice hockey. When I'm on the ice, I look like a newborn giraffe. I don't know how to skate. I came originally from American football. I started playing in Germany, went to college, played for the University of Wisconsin, came back, and I started an agency, basically an agency for consulting in pro sport. And since then, we've worked for ice hockey teams, and for the past 4 years, basketball teams, sorry, and for the past 4 years, we've been focusing on ice hockey. And when we work with teams, basically there's 4 types of people, types of persons we got to address when we talk to them about our philosophy, the way we want to train the athletes. And that's basically the guys that own the club, the guys that pay our bills, the guys that manage the club, those are the stakeholders, I'll say. And then the guys that coach the athletes, the coaches, the whole medical team, be it physical therapists or doctors, and then there's the athletes. And I think there's 4 completely different ways we talk about the similar things. And that's what I'd like to address. First off, I don't believe in luck. Like, when we carefully choose which type of coaches we want to work with for the next years, we always talk to them in the first talk about how he sees the whole thing of luck in sports. I don't believe in luck. I believe in probability and responsibility. I think that's a big difference. When a coach says, or I say, we just lost the game because we weren't lucky enough, I give the responsibility to the universe instead of thinking, okay, what do we have to do better? And I think the first thing when approaching things like Omegawave is to identify the group of people that you work with. Do they share the same philosophy? Especially in terms, for me, do they share the same philosophy in terms of luck? Because at the end, Omegawave is just one piece of the puzzle to improve a probability of winning. And there's a lot of things, and I want to talk to you about some of the applications of Omegawave. So, first, stakeholders. I don't talk to managers or investors a lot about the specifics of what we do and the specifics of training. I'd like to talk to them about numbers. They like to know numbers about their athletes, and basically they like to know numbers about their investment, because they pay a lot of money to maybe manage a team or manage some players, and they want kind of a return of investment. For some it's a hobby. For example, I worked in Cologne for a big ice hockey team there, and there's an investor that doesn't really want results in terms of money, but he wants results in terms of performance because he goes there every weekend and he wants to bring family and friends. So in terms of numbers, I got to talk to them. There's an investment, and our job, my role, is to give you a return on the investment. And there's 2 things we like to talk about. One is wins above budget. For example, if you look at the German Ice Hockey League, there's 14 teams in that league. And everybody has a way different budget. Look at German soccer. There's Bayern Munich, and there's teams way down the bottom. And there's just it's not a level playing field. When I played college football, it's a similar playing field. And when you look at the NFL, similar playing field. They got kind of the same money. In Germany, different story. So when I talk to them, I say, I see my responsibility in helping you have the team score wins above budget. So when we have a team like Wolfsburg, this is the team we currently work for, one of the teams we currently work for. They're number 8 in the league in terms of budget. Last year, we finished 2nd. So this is the thing we really want to focus on. This year, or one thing we talked to them about is how much money did each point in that league cost you? And that's really, really important for them. And when we look at a team like Wolfsburg, we pay a lot less money for each point. So that's the first thing when talking about Omegawave and things like Omegawave. It's not only regarding the Omegawave. How can we help them to save money? And Omegawave is one thing where it doesn't cost 10,000 euros. It's an investment of 10,000 euros, which possibly, if I keep to my responsibility, helps you save more than 10,000. And that's the only thing I focus on. I don't talk to them about physiology. I don't talk to them about, oh, well, it helps us make more decisions in terms of what exercise we use or how intense we're going to use it. They don't care about it. So this is what we focus on with stakeholders. This year, we're number 11 in terms of budget. Right now, we're in place 3. So our part of the promise at this point, we're keeping. We're just one piece of the puzzle, though. Just as Omegawave is one piece of the puzzle. The second thing, talking to stakeholders, is time lost to injury. I don't have to cite all the data, especially in football, that says like time lost to injury correlates really, really well with the outcome at the end. It's obvious. So we just focus on giving them really the numbers, saying this is our promise. Your promise has to be, give us all the tools we need to keep our promise. And our promise will be, we will do our best of our ability to give you these numbers. Last year, we had like 50% less injuries than the rest of the league on average. And that's what we want to focus on. Looking at each individual athlete to really make the best out of each individual athlete, to have in the end winning, we need good tactical development where the manager invests money in a great tactical coach. We need good technical ability where the investor invests money in either athletes that bring great technical ability or also in technical coaches. What the movement right now is, a lot of teams invest a lot more also in movement output, looking at strength, speed, and a lot of teams invest in that. They bring strength coaches, they bring performance coaches. Also looking at movement efficiency, they invest in that. And the way we approach it in terms of Omegawave, when they ask us, hey, why do we need this? What we tell them is, well, yeah, at the base of everything though is, can they use all those things in their packed schedule? Like, do they have the ability to adapt to your investments? You pay a lot of money for your strength coach, but does he have the ability to adapt to that? And Omegawave is one piece of the puzzle. I mean, if you look at lab tests that the doctor does in the beginning of the season, looking at ferritin levels, looking at hormonal levels, it's nothing different. He looks just, what's the base that this athlete brings? And if you are a stakeholder, you're buying or about to buy an athlete, you look at hormonal levels, and like the candle is almost burned out, you think about, do I invest in this guy? And this is just one piece of the puzzle. Okay, so looking at the quantified athlete, we give him data about each athlete, obviously. A lot of coaches do that, like Cornelius did, testing them on each and every level. And just the bottom level, it's the test of the Omegawave. And we just tell them, like, this is the situation at this point in time. No prediction from there, it's just this situation at this point in time. So one thing, the key term I like to use when I talk to managers is, it's a business term, key performance indicator. Like everybody who manages the business, he has key performance indicators. He knows like, what is our gross annual income at the end of the year? From this, they break it down. What's our quarterly income, gross? They break it down. What are our costs? They like to use numbers. And when looking at athletes, it's a similar thing. At the end, we have an ice hockey player who hopefully scores a lot of goals. For that, he needs performance abilities to score a lot of goals. And when we look at numbers like counter movement jump, strength abilities, there's a certain correlation. For example, we use an index. It's basically an accumulated index of a lot of strength numbers, which predicts from the data we have 25% of their performance on the ice, looking at ice hockey specific statistics. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. Breaking the athlete down, breaking the investment down, key performance indicator in terms of adaptational efficiency. How well can the athlete adapt to what we do? So, finalizing the thoughts on how we talk to managers, we always try to argue in numbers. If there's anything we say, but we can't back it up with like solid numbers, we know, well, it's not going to fall on like good nutritional ground to have a thought that grows big. But if they get numbers, they have a thought that starts to grow. We focus on talking about key performance indicators, where we exactly tell them, and the managers that we've been working on more intensely in the last years, we even go into the contracts where we say, these are our key performance indicators we expect out of certain player material. Also, when they go back to the United States and train for 3 months, what's the expectation they bring back when they come back? Like, what's the key performance indicator in terms of strength levels, endurance levels, and everything? So it's a key performance indicator language. And Omegawave, and I think that's the most important thing, is one piece of the puzzle for us to keep our promise. Like, he pays us a lot of money to keep the promise of wins above budget and to keep the promise of injury reduction, hopefully, or keeping below league average, at least. It's not about the training, but it's our job to also manage the people to keep that promise. And also, we say there's certain technical devices we need to keep our promise, and Omegawave is one piece of this. So that's how we talk to stakeholders. Medical team. I studied medicine myself. I'm going to be a doctor in April, so I've got still a little bit to go. But it certainly helped me to talk to doctors. And in the past years, I've made a lot of mistakes talking to doctors. And I've made a lot of mistakes talking to doctors about Omegawave. Because doctors, they're like a really special kind of breed. I have highly respect for the responsibility that doctors have and the amount of time they have to keep that responsibility. So that defines them in the way we have to approach them and talk to them. Basically, what I tell them when the discussion comes onto how do we manage the training process, and maybe they see the device or a player told them about it, or we bring up the topic, what we basically tell them is, hey, it's nothing else basically than what you know from HRV. Like, HRV is a concept that's really established in medicine, in German medicine, in worldwide medicine. It's like since the 1960s, medical doctors use HRV to predict infant mortality in newborn babies. So it's not a new concept. So what we basically tell them is, hey, it's like HRV, but you do it maybe once a year or twice a year, and we have the ability to do it every day. And it's also like ECG. At the beginning of the year, the doctors do a medical test, see if everybody's fit to play the game of ice hockey, to make sure there's nobody on the ice that has a high probability of dying a sudden cardiac death. And this is what we do in the beginning of the year. And what basically we tell them is, well, it's extended cardiac monitoring. We do it year-round. And there's two key advantages here. And I'm going to show you 2 examples. One example is they had an athlete, they did the ECG, and it came back normal. Same athlete does the Omegawave test, and what we see is we see a cardiac arrhythmia. So it jumps from one cardiac pattern, beat pattern, to another, okay? And this is what the Omegawave terminology would be non-functional adaptation of the heart. And this is something we'd like to discuss then with the doctors in terms of question, hey, have you seen this? What do you think of this? Do we have to address this? And it's for us just an extra level to make sure. We had a long discussion about this with this athlete. We approached the doctors. Do we have to worry about this? And the doctors said, no, we don't have to worry about this. This might be not problematic in terms of performance, but not medically problematic. So we don't have an increased risk of complications there. But it's something we're going to keep in mind. I'm going to come back to that example later. But also the other side, where one athlete came back from the doctor, and the doctor said, it's not normal. Without changing anything, this athlete can play. This is something that's called atrial fibrillation. So the upper part of the heart, which pumps blood in the chamber, it goes like zzz. So instead of pumping like this, it goes zzz. So blood doesn't flow really nicely. So this athlete would have to take lifelong medication, at least, or maybe even have surgery to cut a nerve in the heart to improve this. So, but what helped us is by having continuous monitoring was finding out, hey, some days he has it, some days he doesn't. He doesn't have atrial fibrillation every day. This is an example where he doesn't have it. And this changes the diagnosis and just changes the treatment. He doesn't have to take lifelong medication now. He can use different strategies to have more days where he doesn't have atrial fibrillation. So this improves life quality of the athlete by having this extra information. And this is just the medical part. So that really helped us. Going back to that one athlete who had the different heart patterns in the beginning of April, we had a lot of discussions. You talked to Val, you talked to Roman. We were trying to find strategies to improve that. And there were many strategies: nutritional strategies, training strategies, and also sending him to an osteopath who would work on energy meridians with him. Just use that term. And at the end of November, he didn't have those heart rhythms anymore. He has a normal heart rhythm at the end of November. Do I know if that improves his performance? I don't. Maybe Val and Roman can talk a lot more about this. What I feel, though, is that this is a lot safer situation now that he doesn't have heart arrhythmias. We showed it to the doctors, and they say, well, this is good. This is a good thing. So when discussing the physiology of the Omegawave now, I don't get into deep, and I don't want to get into any discussions with doctors. I don't use the term DC potential, because that's going to get me, not into trouble, but it's going to make my life harder than it should be. You know that? Yeah? So I use three things. The three technologies of the Omegawave. HIV is pretty straightforward. Every doctor knows that. Every physical therapist knows that. The second thing, not a lot of people are going to be familiar with. Differential ECG. So on your Omegawave, where it says us things about the aerobic index, the anaerobic index, it's nothing else than the differential ECG. It looks at the ECG pattern and tries to identify small changes that could tell us something about the energy metabolism in the heart, and the doctors go like, what the fuck? What is this? And I have an example. I think I have it from Hank, and I think it's a great example. Well, it's pretty straightforward. This here, this heart pattern, that's a heart attack. Every doctor knows that. That's a heart attack. Like when this wave doesn't normalize to 0, but stays up for a while and then comes back. That's a heart attack. You see this on your guys? Send them to the doctor right away. But what does it tell us? We see when the heart has a heart attack, so an artery in the heart is blocked, and the heart tissue doesn't get enough oxygen, the electrical activity of the heart changes. Every doctor knows that. So thinking about that the ECG can tell us something about the metabolic activity of the heart is not too far off, the thought of this. And this is the point where every doctor opens up and says, well, yeah, sounds cool. Okay? So I don't get into too big of discussion like, the researcher this and this, they showed this, and no, I just give them examples they can work with. Because one thing with doctors is time. You don't have a lot of time. You need to have your arguments squeezed down in one sentence and 15 seconds max. So, working with the medical team. First off, working with the medical team, it's best to really choose the doctors to work with. We had the luxury in Klagenfurt to do that because the guy from the assistant coach from Wolfsburg became head coach in Klagenfurt and said, we want you guys to come with me, and we were able to choose the guys. And we didn't choose them in terms of, we choose them in terms of personality. Like, are they open personality that are able to work within a great team? So when you work with a doctor, they are smart as hell. They really are. They know a lot of stuff, and they've been trained really well in the field they've been trained at. What we sometimes expect out of them to know stuff that out of the field that we are trained at. They shouldn't do that. I've run through the whole medical experience. It's a way different thought process. Although a very important thought process if you try to save people from dying, but maybe not the right process that you need if you have people that are not dying, but you want to make them better. That's just a different thought process. So ask questions to doctors. Like, show them this and say, hey, what do you think of this? Like, what would your approach be? What should our approach be? They know what they're doing when it comes to keeping people alive. Never tell a doctor what to do until you have him at that point where you have asked a lot of questions.
He doesn't know.
Yeah, exactly. When he is at the point where he trusts you enough to say, I don't know. Do you? And at this point, you might be able to tell them what to do. But doctors are not used to having anybody that tells them what to do. Not a patient, and that's good. Not a patient, not a different doctor. They have to carry their own assets and their own responsibility, and they make their own decisions. And there's not a strength coach or a performance coach coming and telling them what to do. Ask them questions until they open up, and then you can discuss what we need to do, or might need to do. Keep all the messages short and on point. Don't expect him to read a long email. I made those mistakes all in the beginning, like shooting them long emails, explaining what we're doing, and months after, I didn't read that, I don't have time. Keep all the messages short and point. Focus on established physiological concepts. Let's be honest here. There might be a lot of things to DC potential. There might be a lot of things to differential ECG, but we shouldn't argue with a German or European doctor too much about this. Let them tell this is part of what we do in our practical work. We don't question any diagnostic that he does, because there's something that does not work really well. And focus on being the extended diagnostic arm when it comes to cardiac monitoring. Tell them that this is a really good value. Coaches. Coaches don't care about physiology. Doctors do, coaches don't. What coaches care about is how are the guys? This is important for them. How are the guys? And the first message we try to transport when working with coaches is, well, look, we might have a great team. You might have done a great job in getting the right people on board, the right athletes on board. We might have done a great job in the preparation to really get them on point. But look, there's a long season, and it's not about what they can do or could do. It's about what they can do in every single day. So if we look at performance, we might be the better team when compared to a rival. But that doesn't count on game day. The only thing on game day counts is, what can you do today? And that's the biggest message we try to transport with coaches. Omegawave terminology, there is readiness and performance. There's a big difference. We try to use the word freshness. In German, for the German guys, it's Spritzigkeit, basically. That's the term that's in Fußball and soccer, very well established. And we tell them, like, there's certain aspects of physiology we can manipulate to have them more spritzig on game day, to have them more fresh on game day. The picture we use with coaches is this. Look, we might have done a great job in the preparation, and we might have great player potential, but this is like this here. If this one down there isn't open, it doesn't matter much to the guys down here or to what happens on game day. We need to have the gates open on game day, and that's what's important. And that's the general broad concept in terms of winning. When we're looking at things like DC potential, we tell them, when we measure the guys, it's for us one part to know where are they right now in terms of their Spritzigkeit, in terms of their mental freshness, in terms of their readiness to really do something great. And not in terms of power or strength or muscles. From my feeling, I don't have the data to back it up, but from my feeling, I think it has a lot to do with sensing awareness and ability to react to stimuli and decision-making process, just the mind being more open to make good decisions when we're on a good value in terms of freshness. And I don't mean only Omegawave. The tools we use aside from Omegawave is, for example, jumping ability. To have that on optimal levels come game day. When you're below your average on game day, I have the feeling that the nervous system doesn't really give you all the tools to have the highest performance on that day. Yeah? Grip strength. Condor movement jump is really well established. Grip strength is one thing, and also I think the DC potential. The other thing, besides being ready on game day, is the aspect of individualized training. All their coaches want their athletes to be in good individualized hands. So the optimum would be to have them really train individually. And one thing we approach with them there is the idea of dynamically using the training programs. Because, and everybody of you knows that, if you have 4 different athletes, and you go through a linear type of program where we say, okay, let's do maximum strength for 4 weeks, let's do aerobic for 4 weeks, or maybe power for 4 weeks, maybe a recovery week or 2 weeks in there. You have really different adaptations, like only looking at, for example, jumping ability. You might have some athletes, you go through the maximum strength phase, they adapt really well. And you might have some athletes that go through max strength and nothing happens. You might have some athletes that go through max strength, they improve a little bit, explosive power, they stay. Recovery, boom, they go up and improve. And like, what sense does it make for us to have like players, like 24 players, and all have them do like this, and this, and this, and this. I think the idea that we as coaches have the magic ball and know what's best for our athletes like weeks from now is kind of outdated. So we try to go away from the calendar thinking as much as infrastructure allows. So this is an off-season model. Bear in mind, this is an off-season model. We try to go away from calendar thinking to like training program SAC thinking. Like we don't give you a calendar where we say this is what you do Tuesday, this is what you do Wednesday, this is what you do Thursday. But rather, we give them a SAC of workouts. We work in 3-week blocks where we give them a SAC of workouts for 3 weeks. An example of this you have in your handouts at the end, where they're in this 3-week SAC, there might be 6 strength sessions. There might be 8 endurance sessions. There might be 5 power sessions. What the athlete does is he measures in the morning. Bear in mind, this is off season. They measure in the morning. They look, okay, what's my most open window of adaptability where it's best to, your body's ability to adapt to this stimulus is best on that day. What's my most open? I pick that workout and I do that on that day. Bear in mind, this is off season. This does not work for us in the in season. So at the end of 3 weeks, the sack is empty. We give them a new sack of new programs, depending on how the output changed during that phase. So after 3 weeks, we have a quick look at, okay, what happened to mobility, endurance values, or strength levels, power levels. That's like really fairly easily done. And from there, give them a new sack of workouts that he empties over the next 3 weeks. We've been doing that for 2 off seasons now. And we've had good success with the athletes that work with us in the off season. In season, there's for us, we're slaves to the infrastructure. I mean, when you have an endurance session, you need way different equipment than you need for a strength session, and that's, maybe at 2 o'clock tonight I have the strength room, and that's what you've got to react to. So we haven't been using this in the in season, this model. And the data catches up to that, or the science catches up to that idea that thinking dynamically also in the training programs. Like there's been research done on HRV, looking at HRV with mid-level runners. Instead of having them do a linear program where they predict kind of what the volumes are going to be, they measured the HRV and basically had the options of no training, medium training, or high intensity training. And they did it according to HRV, and the results of the dynamic group were better than of the static or linear group. Also, in American football, the effects of this type of periodization has been shown by Morris in Kentucky, who looked at American football, and he did, was that in season and pre-season, right? Off season as well? Yes, so yeah. Off season, looking at American football, a lot of players on that football team, I can tell you, and it's really hard to manage the infrastructure, let alone. But he managed to divide them in 2 groups, basically. One group who did the static programming, and one group who did the dynamic program, depending on their Omegawave readings. Dynamic group had better results in terms of jumping power and speed and endurance as well? Yes. Yes, endurance as well? Cool. Speed power. Yeah. So basically, this is the training programs that we work in during off-season and during in-season. You have one in your handout to look at that if you need. What we basically do is we assign those programs 2 things. It's a letter and it's a window. Now we have the option. Now we can say letter B on Friday morning, or we can tell them, well, there is no calendar, just use this. So this gives us the flexibility to, when we are fixed to certain infrastructure, because there's times in the off-season where we still are, we say, hey, it doesn't matter what your window is, you guys do B on Friday morning, or you do B, you do C. Okay, get the idea. It gives us a really good, nice amount of flexibility there. So, coaches, it's the idea of having our players as fresh as possible on game day. And it's the idea of individualizing training, where we say Omegawave is one part of this, where we use this and implement this. It does not mean that we make decisions only on Omegawave, obviously. I've had one coach in Cologne, ice hockey, great coach, won the Stanley Cup. First week, what he told me is, Gerrit, at the end of the day, all decisions you make in coaching is from here. And I think he's right. The data helps us to evaluate more and maybe have the decision on a higher level, but at the end, there's always going to be lack of information, and you got to make a decision from here. Fergus Connolly had a great metaphor for the role we have, and it's the role of the dashboard in the car. Like the coach is driving, and he's driving fast, and he knows where to go, and we're just the dashboard that tells him like how fast are we going, how much gas in the tank. Or maybe when you look at the rally, where they go, hey, 150 meters, right corner, we'll just give him advice, but he has to make the tough decisions in the field. It's about maximizing probability for us. By using Omegawave, we don't know are we going to win those games, but I fairly believe that we are improving the probability of us winning games. And one thing, I've heard many anecdotes of this, I would never, ever make a decision solely on Omegawave, especially when it's about taking away stuff from athletes or coaches. So the thing we do when we see across the board bad Omegawave readings in a team, we reduce the training time for the team by 15 minutes, for example. We try to use things that players don't realize that happened. Because I think as soon as they realize, we make a hard decision because I think that's just stupid to really rely on just one thing to make that decision. It's the big picture of everything that comes together. So we reduce the training time by total. What we also do is when we have bad readings across the board is work with the coach to vary the setup of drills. So they might have a drill where they have 4 groups of 6 players, and we might vary that drill to 2 groups of 12 players. So they have more rest and they can do each exercise with higher intensity. This is pretty straightforward. So this is one of the most important part of the athletes. How do we communicate with the athletes? We don't try to get in their head. I hear a lot of coaches that say we try to have them understand. I don't try to have them understand. I think being fast and being powerful comes from here, not from here. And the more we can get away from here and to here, the better the improvement of the athlete. So we try to talk to them that attracts more of their emotion than their brains. And I see a lot of the things as marketing. So for example, when we talk about performance improvement for athletes in terms of adaptational levels and stress and recovery, we talk to them about Wolverine. Wolverine, everybody knows Wolverine now, even the young athletes, now that the movies came out. He's the superhero that doesn't fly. He's not made out of steel. He doesn't have laser vision or anything. But what he can do is he can recover really, really fast. He gets shot and it just recovers. So what we basically tell him is, hey, when you want to be the best you can be, look at Wolverine, try to be like Wolverine. And we give him like steps to be like Wolverine. For example, we start with a 10-point list. 10 points each for each point. For example, 9 hours of sleep, 10 points. Have a breakfast, 10 points. Eat, drink fluid, 10 points. Like that's the basis. So all this, and also where we introduce Omegawave, is under the umbrella of Project Wolverine and also Project 168. The week has 168 hours, and it's not about the 20 hours that you're on the ice or in the strength room. It's about the time away from that. So we talk to them about 4 systems they can use to improve their performance. We try to not talk too much about recovery or injury prevention. They don't care too much about this, but about improving performance. And that's the 4 vitamins, also learned from Fergus Connolly. Vitamin R for restoration methods. For example, using the ice bath, it's part of concept vitamin R. Vitamin S, everything that falls under the umbrella of sleep. Vitamin M, everything that falls under the umbrella of micronutrients. And vitamin F, food. So what we developed is, with help from the guys from Omegawave, was a really straightforward system for us. When an athlete is kind of in a dump, to have a system to get him out of there. So when we see in the jump values or on his ability on the ice, or he approaches us and says, I don't feel great, that's the latest point where we do a measurement with them. And according to that measurement, we give them strategies, like really concrete strategies. The more concrete the strategies are, the higher the chance the athlete is really going to do it. So what I gave you in the handouts is, what are our food strategies, sleep strategies, restorative strategies, or micronutrient strategies to shift them from a certain point to another. So for example, if you have a sympathetically overdriven athlete, or for this example, sympathetically overdriven, use things that activate his parasympathetic. Like, use all those strategies on there are things that are said to reduce parasympathetic. And so far from the measurements we've done, except for some things where it didn't show like this all works. Like magnesium, something increases serotonin in the brain, activates parasympathetic. So all those strategies to activate parasympathetic. And also for sympathetic and also for different DC situations, what is it we can do? We have heard Cornelius talk about osteopathic treatments or manual therapy in certain disease situations. I think you should find that on there as well. One thing with athletes, in the beginning we tried to introduce the Omegawave here as, hey, look at all the data and look at the big graphs, and well, they don't care about this, they don't. And also to improve recovery, they don't. Reduce injury, they don't. But if you show them that this is a tool that helps them to improve performance, they're listening. And the less we try to talk about it, the more success we've had with them. Yeah.
Have you seen any difference when you then compare different age groups, having the guys in their 20s being less susceptible to the injury prevention recovery talk?
Definitely.
30-year-olds, are they more interested in that?
Definitely. Guys over 30, when you talk about sleep improvement, they have kids and you tell them like what they can do to sleep through and everything, they love it. But yeah, guys in their 20s, the girls love them. They're superpower. They're superhero. They don't. And I think that's great because that's what makes them great athletes. And I don't want to be the guy who tells them, well, you look at this. I'm not. So. Definitely. As soon as an athlete has an injury, you're his best friend. And as soon as an athlete is in a rut, you're his best friend. We had one guy in Cologne, great player, national team player. He was shitty because, that's my reasoning. After season, he played inline hockey world championships. Then he trained right away, running all those hills in his hometown in Bavaria. He didn't have a week off. Coming into season, hard camp, maybe the hardest camp those players ever seen in ice hockey, and some of them played in the NHL. He had a shitty season. And that's when he opened up. Before he was king of the world, but then he opened up. We helped him reduce some of the things, cut something out, improve his sleep patterns. His game scores went up. He shot goals. And ultimately from there, what do we need to do? Wait, you guys know that. So what I focus on is not talk too much about recovery or injury prevention to people that haven't experienced under recovery or injuries. It's like a foreign concept to them. Focus on the individual aspect. I think the Omegawave is a great tool to tell the athlete, I'm here to help you as an individual. Like, we have the team things, we do as a team, but then we have the time where you do the measurement and we discuss after this. Not the physiology, but what do we need to do to help you as an individual. Those recovery strategies or improved adaptational strategies are one piece of the puzzle. Yeah, it's about maximizing performance. When we look at the windows of opportunity, first thing comes up is, well, it's red. That's shit, right? Well, it's not optimal for you to do work today, but it doesn't mean you can't jump your record. I've seen people jump new records on where two of the four were red. I don't think it has anything to do with this. But it's more about where can you maximize the time that you do? We've talked a little bit about a good program being doing as little as possible for the maximum result. And I think this is where it comes in. When you have the choice, bear in mind, when you have the choice to do the strength program or the aerobic program, do the program that your your stress reservoir has the most open ears to. And that's about it. It doesn't mean you're shit on that day. It doesn't mean you're not going to perform well. It's just that it costs you more. I try to talk to them. I really love the term. This is probably one of the things in the past 2 years that I've loved learning, is the idea of cost of adaptation or cost of performance. You might jump really high, but it costs you more. It's like when I talk to them about financials. When you have money in your bank, you take $100 out, that's fine. When you don't have money in your bank, you take $100 out, you got to pay $105 back because the bank wants interest. And it's the same thing with stress reservoir. You have a stress reservoir, you can perform, and you only got to recover the way you perform, kind of. Your stress reservoir is limited. You try to perform on that day, you might perform really well, but you take more out than if you had the reservoir. So the cost of what you did to perform. All the data we use, all the data we get from systems like Omegawave, I think are just a catalyst for communication. So at this point, when we use the Omegawave data, it's a possibility to discuss with the head coach, okay, why do we have this situation that 8 out of 12 players of our starting lineups are in a rut right now? Why is that? What is it we can do? And Omegawave, I think, doesn't give us the answers for that. And part of the philosophy of Omegawave is also they don't want to give us the answers, I think, because it's in us to find the answers. But it's a catalyst of communication to discuss those things. Also with the athlete. Finally, the biggest takeaways for me in the last years of using the tool like Omegawave are some do's and don'ts. I think, always, when you try to measure more, you should know in advance what kind of decision it's going to help you with. And I've had some coaches in the Bundesliga that contacted me and asked me about Omegawave, and they say they want to test it, and they just want to try a project on it for 3 months, and I say it's not going to work. It's not going to work for you. You got to know what decision is going to help you on. For example, if you are in front of the decision, an athlete doesn't feel well and you don't know what's best for him, be it ice or sauna, I think that's where Omegawave comes in handy as a decision-helping tool. When you're in front of the decision, do I have to practice more or do I have to practice less to achieve a certain result? I think that's where Omegawave can come in handy. Because sometimes results go down, for example, jumping ability goes down. This can have 2 reasons. Too much training or too little training. Like, from a basic perspective. And Omegawave comes in handy to decide why, what do we have to do? And if you don't have this setup of which decision is going to help me to go either left or right, it's just going to fall in like empty space. Like, it's going to be measurements, it's going to be a lot of questions, like what does it tell us, where's the science on it? It's going to be a lot of trouble. And I've seen it a lot of times. Basically all the guys that called me want to do a project and said it's not going to work like this, it didn't work. So I think you got to know what you need, what decision you're going to make with this. Take a really, really tiny, and a lot of guys that start with it, they think it's a tiny step, and it's actually a really big step. They're really tiny steps, and reevaluate after at least 3 months. And I suggest for all the guys that start out with Omegawave, and that's my perspective, I think Val might have a different opinion on Mika, my perspective is to start with the individualized recovery. That's the sheets I gave you. Because it's a power vacuum. Nobody knows what to do in recovery. It's a power vacuum. I think Omegawave can, for a certain period, fill that power vacuum, where it can help us to say, hey, nobody knows what's best to do. Here's something that might help us to know what's best to do. And then you start with individualized recovery. Everybody might have set up a monitoring system where they do counter movement jumps over weeks and see how that reacts over the season. They might do training stress balance and work with RPEs or anything. But what do you do when somebody's in a rut? Yeah, you can work on training strategies, but what are the recovery strategies you're doing at this point? And I think this is a power vacuum. I think this is where Omegawave comes in. And when somebody in the Bundesliga wants to try something, I suggest work with that, because that's going to fall on like ground that's very nutritional. And a lot of people are going to be very thankful and saying, oh, this is great. We didn't know it before. And from there, you can work in different areas. If it worked after 3 months, if the opposition was too strong, drop it. Come back after a year or don't. But don't try to force it. Only implement what feels right for you. You might have a great logical argument, but if you don't feel comfortable talking to the guys that make the big decisions, don't do it. Because there might be some piece missing for you. There might be some information missing for you, some skill set that you don't have when you don't. There's a lot of things in terms of Omegawave that we don't use the Omegawave with because I wouldn't feel comfortable talking to the coaches about it. I don't feel comfortable talking to the coaches about using Omegawave to modifying in-season training loads to a high degree. To a little degree we do, but I don't feel comfortable, so I don't do it. I might feel comfortable when I learn more from you guys also, but at this point I don't, so I don't do it. I might have all the arguments set up. If I write an argument about it, I might have everything perfectly set up, but I don't feel comfortable doing this. Transport the understanding that, I mean, we all do this basically. We are in an environment where there is no information. Like, we can't rely on research. Like, research is usually a lot of years behind what's going on. Like, and on a daily situation, you got to make a lot of decisions. Do I play this player? How much do I play him? What's the load going to be? Like, do we train today? Should we give him a day off? Like, we travel? Should we stay there at night? Or, well, no, maybe we travel earlier. What do you think? We don't know. We don't know anything. And I think coaching is a lot about making decisions where there are no informations. And there's a certain point where we try to argue differently, like where we try to argue with scientists and try to, this because this and this. We don't have the because. I don't. As a coach, I think I don't have the because. I do this and I reevaluate after this. So, and this goes back to the last point, I've tried to do it for a lot of years. Don't try to argue with the tool of science. When working with Omegawave, I found to send one a paper or argue, like, look what this showed. For every paper you send them, they send 2 arguments back. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Don't ever argue with science with a doctor or a coach or a player, or don't. If you're at this point where you feel you have to argue with science, you're already out of position. They don't trust you. And I've had this experience, and right now, the less I do this, the more I feel they trust me. So yeah. Yes?
Because science is, for me, is also generalization. It's not individualization. That's a big difference.
In general, no, because there can be individual science as well. But if you look at the established science that there is, most of it is generalized, yeah. And that's where a lot of things get dropped. I think there's a case in recent scientific developments for the N1 science, where they just look at one single individual and look at it more longitudinal. And there's more research coming out of this, but in general, yes, you're right. It's a lot of get lost in the averages, yes.
So with Omegawave in particular, you're not on the same page.
Yes. Yeah.
That's my.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're arguing on different foundations, and I don't try to argue on science anymore. Any other questions?
Maybe one comment, but I think there's great value in the methods of science.
Oh, of course.
Because
of course.
It should be.
You're on point. You're on point. Everybody here believes in the scientific method. We just got to agree on this, I think, because the scientific method is we do something, we look at did it work. If it worked, we keep doing it. If it didn't work, we drop doing it. Yeah, and I totally believe in the scientific method. I believe in science to a big degree as well. I just don't try to argue with science, because especially in this field, the science we need to argue with this is just not developed enough. The German Institute of Sport, they funded a big project on regeneration management. And a lot of people that know where this project is going know we are this much closer, but we're way far off knowing what regeneration is, how we measure it, and it's very far away. So we are in a field where there's no information. We got to take all the tools we can to increase probability. Yeah. Any other comments?